Dato Sri Najib found guilty of abuse of power charge. Hoisting of Jalur Gemilang marks launch of 2020 National Month. Hello and good afternoon. I'm Amin Carlos and welcome to Updates at Noon. The Kuala Lumpur High Court today convicted former Prime Minister Dato Sri Najib Tun Razak of one of the 7 charges against him in connection with 42 million ringgit belonging to former 1MDB unit SRC International. Well, trial judge Mohammad Nazlan Mohammad Ghazali ruled that the defense had failed to raise reasonable doubt on the prosecution's case for the abuse of power charge. Now, Justice Mohammad Nazlan ruled that the defense has not succeeded in rebutting the resumption on the balance of probabilities or raising reasonable doubt against the accused under Section 23, subsection 1 of the Malaysian Anti-Corruption Commission Act. He also ruled that the accused was involved in the establishment of SRC International Sendirian Berhad. Mohammad Nazlan noted that there was no dispute that Cabinet's approval for the Retirement Fund Incorporated or KWAP's first 2 billion ringgit loan to SRC International was, quote-unquote, rushed. Now, for this loan, the judge stated that Dato Sri Najib made a request and it was ultimately conveyed to KWAP's investment panel. At the time, Dato Sri Najib was the finance minister and was thus in charge of KWAP. The judge is now making a ruling on the other 6 charges. Dato Sri Najib was charged with 1 count of abuse of power, 3 counts of criminal breach of trust or CBT and 3 counts of money laundering, all involving 42 million ringgit misappropriated from SRC International Sendirian Berhad, a 1MDB subsidiary. He faces imprisonment of up to 20 years and a fine for the abuse of power charge, up to 20 years prison, whipping and a fine for the 3 CBT charges, and up to 15 years in jail and a fine for the money laundering charges. On to other news items. Now, the 2020 National Month and Fly the Jalur Gemilang campaign was launched in an atmosphere with high patriotism ahead of the National Day and Malaysia Day celebrations. Now, the launch by Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin was held for the first time at Dataran Perdana Putra, with limited attendance in compliance with the Standard Operating Procedures or SOP of the Recovery Movement Control Order, the RMCO. Now, with the country still fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, the frontliners are not forgotten, with the relevant heads of departments and agencies invited to participate in the event. The program started with a special address by the Prime Minister, which was broadcast live by Radio Television Malaysia, RTM. And after delivering his speech, Tan Sri Muhyiddin handed the Jalur Gemilang to the Malaysian Armed Forces, the ATM, for the flag hoisting ceremony, which was carried out by 6 officers, each from ATM, the Royal Malaysia Police, Immigration Department, Department of Volunteers, the Health Ministry and the Information Department. The hoisting of the Jalur Gemilang was accompanied by the singing of the national anthem by the Information Department's choir group, Pentarama, with music provided by the ATM band. The highlight was the launch of the singing of the theme song for the 2020 National Day and Malaysia Day celebration, Malaysia Prihatin, by the Pentarama choir group. The song was composed by RTM's music director, Dato Moghzani Ismail, with the lyrics by El Sol Ahmad. The event at Dataran Perdana ended with the Prime Minister flagging off the Merdeka Info on Wheels, known as IOW, which will travel throughout the country until 15 September to boost the spirit of patriotism among the people. Malaysia is set to be hit by a 3rd wave of the COVID-19 pandemic if the people continue to be complacent about complying with the Standard Operating Procedure, the SOP, such as wearing a face mask and practicing social distancing. Health Director General Dr. Nur Hisham Abdullah said the increase in new clusters could cause a spike if cases of the outbreak is not properly controlled.
Kluster-kluster yang baru bagaikan sebagai bahan api iaitu yang menunggu iaitu burning amber ataupun bahan api. Tetapi kita sebagai rakyat Malaysia, kalau kita tak patuh kepada SOP, jadi kluster adalah diibaratkan kluster yang baru ni ibaratkan sebagai bara yang sedang nak membakar. Kita ni kalau tak patuh ber SOP sebagai bahan api. Jadi kalau bara berjumpa dengan bahan api akan merebak satu pembakaran yang besar. Jadi kes akan meningkat secara mendadak.
The Health Ministry has recorded 120 new cases in the 30th epidemiological week from 19th until 25th July. Asked about the use of single-ply and two-ply face masks, Dr. Noor Hisham said they were not effective in preventing one from being infected by the virus. He said the World Health Organization, or WHO, had issued guidelines stating that the face masks must use hydrophilic and hydrophobic material to avoid COVID-19 infection. On another note, Dr. Noor Hisham said the Health Ministry will discuss with airline companies on implementing COVID-19 screening tests for passengers transiting in Malaysia before going to their respective destinations. However, the costs of the screening must be borne by the passengers themselves.
Bantuan ini bukan hanya melibatkan Kementerian Kesihatan, dia melibatkan syarikat penerbangan. Jadi polisi syarikat penerbangan contohnya, ada mereka yang nak pulang pada sesuatu negara, kalau syarikat penerbangan menetapkan mereka perlu menjalani saringan ataupun ujian COVID-19 sebelum mereka menaiki pesawat, itu adalah satu syarat daripada itu. Kalau kita melaksanakan, kita pasti boleh mencegah kes-kes yang positif menaiki pesawat.
He said this when answering to a question on the temporary ban by the Cambodian government on all flights from Malaysia and Indonesia to curb the spread of COVID-19 effective 1st August. According to a report, the action had to be taken by the country's health ministry after an increase in the number of imported cases again in recent weeks, especially from the two countries. Dr. Noor Hisham explained that all 55 positive cases involving Cambodian transit passengers did not get infected when transiting in Malaysia. Well, the government will limit interzone movement in Sarawak from the 1st until 14 August in a bid to curb the spread of the COVID-19 in the state, especially in the city of Kuching. Senior Minister Dato' Sri Ismail Sabri Yaakob said this was following a request by the state government for stern and proactive measures to be taken to combat the rising number of cases in Sarawak. There will be two zones involved, with Zone 1 being yellow to red zone involving Kuching, Serian and Samarahan, while green zone comprise Seriaman, Betong, Sarike, Kapit, Muka, Bintulu, Miri and Limbang. The senior minister said any individual who wants to move between the zones must get permission from the police first, while movements within zones are allowed.
Pergerakan zon berbeza juga dengan PKP. Kalau kita PKP dulu, semua keluar rumah pun tak boleh. Yang ini boleh. Tetapi mesti mohon kebenaran daripada pihak polis. Maknanya masih ada kebebasan. Cuma sekatannya perlu mendapat kebenaran saja. Intrazone boleh. Kalau dalam zon merah sekalipun, daripada kota Samarhan, daripada Samarhan nak pergi Kuching, boleh dibenarkan. Tetapi perlu, kalau keluar zon, perlu mendapat kebenaran. Kerana kita tak mahu daripada zon merah pergi ke zon hijau. Mungkin akan beri kesan kepada zon hijau tersebut.
Speaking during a media briefing on the Recovery Movement Control Order, the RMCO, in Parliament yesterday, he said the Sarawak government had also agreed to reduce the number of flights from the peninsula, Sabah and Labuan to Sarawak from 1st until 14th August. Well, meanwhile, Dato' Sri Ismail Sabri also announced that the government had decided to tighten the standard operating procedures, or SOPs, for ship crew members signing on and signing off process to prevent the spread of COVID-19, especially to the locals. Well, it said crew members scheduled to undergo the signing on process are now required to undergo COVID-19 swab tests upon arrival at Malaysia's international port. Now, if tested positive, they will be sent to a hospital for treatment, while those tested negative will be required to undergo a 14-day mandatory quarantine at the quarantine station and to take the second swab test on the 13th day. According to him, if they are still tested negative on the 13th day, they will be allowed to proceed to the signing on process at the port. The same process would be required by crew members who will be signing off at the port.
Daripada laporan Kementerian Kesihatan, antara kes import yang memberi yang menyumbang kepada jumlah kes import ni tinggi adalah melibatkan anak-anak kapal, kru kapal. Kerajaan hari ini telah mengambil keputusan untuk memperketatkan SOP bagi proses pertukaran anak kapal. Biasanya anak kapal ini punya had masa untuk bekerja dan mereka mesti keluar apabila sampai tempohnya. Jadi apa yang berlaku sekarang, apabila mereka keluar berlabuh, mereka nak pulang ke negara masing-masing yang melibatkan klasi daripada luar, mereka akan keluar dan terus pulang ke negara masing-masing tanpa kuarantin sebelum ini. Kerana mereka terus pulang ke negara masing-masing. Tetapi ada ketikanya mereka gagal untuk mematuhi SOP. Ada yang keluar membeli belah dan sebagainya.
The cost of the 14-day mandatory quarantine and the COVID-19 swab tests will be fully borne by their employers. Still to come, 5 Indonesians nabbed with ganja worth 700,000 ringgit. Well, smuggling syndicates are acting boldly by paying locals as well as school students to channel information on the movement of security forces at the border. Now, the National Task Force, or NTF, in a media statement said investigations found that these non-aggressive version of a tonto or thugs receive payments as low as 50 ringgit a day to provide information to smuggling syndicates. Well, Malaysian Border Security Agency AXIM Deputy Director General for Strategic Muhammad Rizwan Muhammad Zain said tonto activities were now more cunning with a wide network of communications. Now, NTF stressed that use of locals to smuggle in illegal immigrants through the nation's waters or borders is an act of treachery. Thus, Special Operation Benteng under NTF involving several security forces such as the Malaysian Armed Forces or MAF, Royal Malaysia Police, Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency, Malaysian Border Security Agency, AXIM, and Royal Malaysian Customs Department, JKDM, will strictly patrol national borders from being encroached by illegal immigrants. Well, the people are also called on to channel any information related to this matter to NTF Operations Centre. Well, 5 Indonesian men were arrested for attempting to smuggle in 230 kilograms of ganja by the Kedah and Perlis Malaysian Maritime Enforcement Agency, or Maritime Malaysia, over the weekend. The total value of the seized ganja was at 700,000 ringgit. Kedah and Perlis Maritime Director First Admiral Muhammad Zawawi Abdullah said patrol vessels detected 2 boats on Saturday near Kuala Beras Basah, and as soon as they were about to inspect them, they fled before a chase ensued at sea. Now, the suspects, 2 on the first boat and 3 more on the second on board, were eventually caught some 20 minutes later. The patrol vessel also managed to seize 4 large sacks of ganja from the boats. Well, it said their boats were towed to the agency's jetty, while the 5 suspects were made to undergo COVID-19 screenings. Well, he told a media conference at the agency's headquarters at Bukit Malud Langkawi. Now, all 5 suspects aged between 25 and 54, and the seized items were then handed over to the agency's investigators. An advertising company director was charged in 2 separate sessions court in Kuala Lumpur yesterday with 12 counts of using false documents and invoices totaling 10 million ringgit relating to Tourism Malaysia contracts. Ibrahim Omar, 48, pleaded not guilty to all the charges before judges Azman Ahmad and Azura Alwi. Now, before Judge Azman, the accused was charged with 7 counts of dishonestly falsifying documents for the global advertising agencies and promotion for Tourism Malaysia tender, in which he had reasons to believe that all of them documents were false. Meanwhile, before Judge Azura, the accused, who hails from Sabah, was charged with 3 more counts of falsifying documents sent by email for the same tender. He was accused of committing the offences at the Tourism Malaysia office in Putrajaya on 10 September and at Pembangunan Leasing Corporation Credit and Factoring Sendirian Berhad, or PLCCM, at Menara Bank Pembangunan Jalan Sultan Ismail, Kuala Lumpur, between 5th and 10th June 2020. Now, all of the 10 charges were under Section 471 of the Penal Code, which carry a jail sentence of up to 2 years or fine or both if convicted. Now, as for the 2 remaining charges, Ibrahim Omar is accused of submitting 2 invoices with false details to Malik Omar, the head of a disbursement credit administration at PLCCM, for the Tourism Malaysia Global Media buy worth 7.2 million ringgit. The accused was granted 250,000 ringgit bail for all the charges, with one surety, with Azura setting additional conditions for him to surrender his passport and to report to the Kuala Lumpur MACC office once every month. The court then fixed 1st September for remention of the case. Still ahead, Mecca's Grand Mosque lies almost empty as Saudi gears up for downsized Hajj. Well, Germany will make COVID-19 tests mandatory for travelers returning from high-risk areas, as Health Minister Jean Spahn said Monday, as fears grow over rising case numbers blamed on summer holidays and local outbreaks. The regulations will come into force next week, the Health Ministry tweeted, and tests will be free. Now, the debate around COVID-19 testing intensified over the weekend after Germany's 16 states agreed on Friday for free tests for all returning travelers, but had stopped short of making the tests mandatory. Now, after a meeting with state officials on Monday, Chancellor Chief of Staff Helge Braun said there was a great willingness to move closer to such mandatory tests. Bavarian Premier Markus Söder had earlier joined a growing chorus of voices calling for tests to become compulsory for returning holidaymakers. In Bavaria, Söder said the southern German state will set up coronavirus test sites at its 2 biggest railway stations, as well as key points on motorways. Germany has fared better than many of its neighbors in suppressing the virus, reporting just over 200,000 cases and 9,118 deaths to date. But the country has also been hit by repeated COVID-19 outbreaks at slaughterhouses, keeping authorities on high alert. Saudi Arabia on Wednesday begins hosting the annual Hajj pilgrimage, dramatically downscaled due to the COVID-19 pandemic that has barred millions of international pilgrims for the first time in modern history. Well, up to 10,000 people residing in the kingdom will participate in the Muslim ritual, a tiny fraction of the 2.5 million that attended last year. Now, the foreign press are barred from this year's Hajj, well, usually a huge global media event, as the government tightens access to the holy city of Mecca and puts in place strict health restrictions to prevent a virus outbreak during the 5-day pilgrimage. Now, mask-clad pilgrims began trickling into Mecca over the weekend and were subject to temperature checks and placed in quarantine. According to a Hajj Ministry program document, the pilgrims were given elaborate amenity kits that include sterilized pebbles for a stoning ritual, disinfectants, masks, a prayer rug, and the ihram, a seamless white garment worn by pilgrims. Well, pilgrims are required to be tested for COVID-19 before arriving in Mecca and will also have to be quarantined after the pilgrimage. Now, the ministry said it has set up multiple health facilities, mobile clinics and ambulances to cater to the pilgrims who will be required to observe social distancing. Well, Belgium's second city, Antwerp, announced a nighttime curfew on Monday as the country toughened social distancing and mask-wearing rules to stem a flare-up in COVID-19 cases. In the city, a major business hub and seaport, bars and restaurants will close at 11 p.m. and citizens will be obliged to get home by 11:30 p.m. and to stay there until 6 a.m. Now, everyone over 12 years old will have to wear a face mask in public places and crowded areas. Contact and adult team sports will be banned and teleworking will be compulsory for anyone whose employment allows it. Well, Antwerp Governor Cathy Burgs said in a statement that the situation in her city was such that she had decided to supplement the measures already taken on a national level. Earlier, Prime Minister Sophie Wilms ordered that from Wednesday, Belgians would be allowed to see a maximum of 5 people outside of their families, reducing their social bubble from 15. Well, working from home will be strongly recommended. Wilms's declaration came as fears grew in some European countries of a damaging second wave of the pandemic, with Britain reimposing quarantine requirements on holidaymakers returning from Spain. Belgian health officials said there had been a rapid rise in COVID-19 cases, with 1,952 new infections over the past week. Coming up, Malaysia to host ACL matches in East Asia. Well, 6-time Super League champions Johor Darul Takzim, JDT, has been handed a huge advantage after Malaysia was picked to host the 2020 AFC Champions League East Zone Group G and H matches following the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the Asian Football Confederation, AFC, said in a statement that the Football Association of Malaysia, FAM, had been awarded the hosting rights for Group G and H, scheduled to be held from 17 October to 1st November. Malaysia will also host 2 of the round of 16 matches, which will see the top 2 teams from the 2 groups battling out on 4th November. The 2 quarterfinal matches on 25th November and a semi-final tie 3 days later. All the matches in the knockout stages will be played in a single match format. The AFC had initially planned on a home and away format for the tournament, but the global COVID-19 pandemic in March scuppered their plans. Group G comprises Vissel Kobe of Japan, JDT, Guangzhou Evergrande FC from China, and Suwon Samsung Blue Wings from South Korea. While Yokohama F Marinos from Japan, Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors FC South Korea, Sydney FC Australia, and Shanghai SIPG FC from China make up Group H. Meanwhile, AFC said that the centralized venue for the groups E and F, as well as the knockout stage matches, are yet to be confirmed. AFC had earlier confirmed Qatar as the centralized venue to host the groups A, B, C, and D matches, as well as the knockout stage matches in the West Zone. And Jurgen Klopp was voted the League Managers Association Manager of the Year on Monday after ending Liverpool's 30-year wait to win the Premier League. While Klopp led Liverpool to the Premier League title in the same season, they were FIFA Club World Champions. The Germans award was announced by former Manchester United boss Alex Ferguson, after whom the trophy is now named. Chris Wilder, last year's winner of the award, settled for the runners-up spot, this time after Sheffield United's impressive first season back in the Premier League. Meanwhile, Klopp wants to retain a lean squad to ensure Liverpool remain competitive next season. The Reds boss used 24 players in the Premier League this term. Klopp gave chances to some of the club's academy players in the FA and League Cups to cope with fixture congestion. But he believes keeping as small a core as possible keeps the players on their toes. And that's all the time we have this afternoon. In our top story, Dr. Sri Najib found guilty of abuse of power charge. Next news bulletin at 10 this evening at the Berita RTM channel on My Free Views channel 123. I'm Carlos. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.